162. Doceticism, the crippling heresy. Position paper number 171, January 1994. Recently, Dr. J. Dwight Praed, historian, mentioned to me in a dinner conversation that a major and unrecognized sin in evangelical churches today is doceticism. Even more, as he pointed out, it is an unrecognized sin. What is doceticism? Doceticism is the belief that Christ's humanity was more or less an appearance, because his deity, or his supernatural nature, could not be comprehended by flesh. Christ was seen, by the early Docetists, as a spiritual rather than a fleshly being. These Docetists regarded even the apostles as foolish men for affirming the full humanity of Christ. John spoke of the Docetists in these words: "For many deceivers are entered into the world, who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist." 2 John verse 7, compare 1 John chapter 4 verse 2. Very early, Ignatius wrote of the Trallians against this spiritualization. He declared that he possessed peace through the flesh and blood and passion of our Jesus Christ. Salvation was not a spiritual work, but a bloody sacrifice of atonement. Docetism did violence to the whole Bible. Ignatius said, "Let no man be called good who mixes good with evil. For they speak of Christ, not that they may preach Christ, but that they may reject Christ. And they speak of law, not that they may establish the law, but that they may proclaim things contrary to it. For they alienate Christ from the Father, and the law from Christ." In other words, their false spirituality led to a depreciation of Christ's humanity and also of the law. They were too spiritual for flesh and blood and for law. This, said Ignatius, is the snare of the devil. At the same time that Ignatius insisted on the reality of the incarnation in flesh and blood, he insisted also that this Christ was fully God, and he spoke of Jesus as "my God" to the Romans 6 verse 6. Apocryphal and Gnostic writings routinely depicted Christ in docetic terms. In fact, doceticism could be called a form of Gnosticism. It found a fully physical Christ repulsive. The idea of God incarnate or some higher spiritual being fully flesh and being subject to all the necessities of a material life seemed to them a coarse and unspiritual belief. This quote-unquote problem has haunted many over the centuries. The American transcendentalist Margaret Fuller found it hard to accept bodily functions, even in herself. Flesh is so unspiritual. Implicit in Docetism is an opinion which, whether in its Neoplatonic form or as outright Manichaeanism, tended to identify the flesh with sin and the spirit with the good. Of course, Satan being a purely spiritual being, this equation is false. Man's problem is not a metaphysical one. It is not his flesh, but his sin that is the source of problems. His problem is a moral one. The horror of Neoplatonic and Manichaean thought for physical life is behind the docetic depreciation of Christ's true humanity. The extreme Docetists in the early church held that Jesus was a mere man whom the Logos had entered into at the baptism and then abandoned at the cross. The humanity of Jesus was an appearance used by the Logos. Tertullian asked the Docetists, "How is it that you make the half of Christ a lie? He was all truth." From Ignatius on, there were men who insisted that both matter and spirit are the creation of the triune God. Both are affected by sin, and both are redeemed by our Lord. The resurrection of the body tells us of God's glorious purpose for us, and the new creation testifies to his love of his physical world. The church is called Christ's body, his new humanity, to stress the fact of God's love of his physical handiwork. We are not angels. More than angels, we creatures are made in God's image. Knowledge, holiness, righteousness or justice, and dominion. To demean the flesh is to demean God and Christ, and also the Spirit, the Maker with Father and Son of the physical universe. B.J. Kidd saw the relationship of Gnosticism and Docetism. Carpocrates, a leader in such opinions, evinced the tendency to plunge into immorality on principle. His son, Epiphanes, circa AD 130, advocated a Platonic community of women and goods. B.J. Kidd, A History of the Church to AD 461, Volume 1, page 197. The major heretics were Docetists, as witness Marcion, page 218. The Docetists often had a surface faithfulness. Thus, some affirmed the virgin birth, but held that our Lord's body came through, but not of Mary, page 226. Quote, apostolic end quote writings were forged to promote Docetism, page 275. All this was done to, quote-unquote, save the incarnation from the supposed degradation of flesh. The incarnation was thus not a literal union of God and man, but a spiritual and seeming union. By removing Jesus from flesh, the, quote, spiritual, end quote, follower of Jesus was also removed from the contaminating world of the flesh and the law. Antinomianism has Docetic roots, as Ignatius saw. Men like Gregory of Nyssa, who strove to be orthodox, still rejected the law as too fleshly. Gregory ridiculed the idea that God's law at any point was truly literal. It was, for him, a vast allegory, as his Life of Moses, circa AD 390, which he wrote to prove that the Mosaic books were not to be taken literally, so clearly shows. Gregory found it impossible to believe that God could actually be interested in history, law, diet, or any such thing. Because the Docetist, however much he conforms to the form of orthodoxy, does not take the incarnation literally, he cannot relate the problems of our world to Jesus Christ and to the Bible. His spiritual Jesus cannot cleanse the temple. His spiritual religion refuses to accept the law of God. The Docetist turns the church into a retreat from the world rather than a place of empowerment to disciple all nations. Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 to 20. The Docetist is a retreatist. John tells us, "This is a victory that overcometh the world, even our faith." 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. The Docetist insists on seeing this victory as something spiritual, so that the world can go to the devil. But if in our souls we have peace, we are, quote, victorious, end quote. This is nonsense. The word overcome in the Greek text is nikar, from Nike. Its root meaning is to subdue, to triumph. This takes us back to the creation mandate, to exercise dominion and to subdue the earth. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28. This is a task that requires that man, with all his being, body and soul, serve the Lord. Docetism has crippled the Church. Whether it be a theological or a practical Docetism, implicit or explicit, it leaves the Church and its people powerless. It takes away Christ our King, the universe's only potentate, 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 15, and leaves us only a pale, bloodless shadow. O Lord our King, thy temple needs cleansing again.